Have you ever watched a fragile old man blink exactly once and realized it was a signal, not a twitch? Mom called the $20,000 check in my hand a prop. She waited for me to burn it like the others. I didn't. I slipped it into my pocket instead, because the next morning, I was going to do the only thing capable of crumbling this family to dust. I was going to deposit it. My name is Valeria James, and usually, by the time we hit the winding roads of Ketchum, Idaho, I have already dissociated. My husband, Marco, was driving our 5-year-old sedan with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the snow-packed asphalt. The heater was rattling, fighting a losing battle against the Sun Valley winter. But the chill I felt had nothing to do with the temperature outside. It was the specific, gravitational dread of returning to the James family estate. They called it the Winter Lodge, a name that suggested cozy sweaters and hot cocoa. In reality, it was a sprawling fortress of timber, glass, and judgment, a place where affection was rationed like wartime sugar and humiliation was served in crystal goblets. For the last 6 months, since I had declined to attend a charity gala so I could finish a freelance data analysis contract, my mother, Celeste, had referred to me exclusively as the educated leech. The nickname had stuck. It was her way of reminding everyone that while I had the degrees, I lacked the family talent for marrying into equity or inheriting grace. I was the worker bee in a hive of queens, and tonight was the first time I would be facing them since the nickname went public in the family group chat. We pulled up the heated driveway. The snow melted instantly upon contact with the pavement, a display of wealth that always felt aggressive to me. The lodge loomed ahead, its massive windows glowing with amber light. Inside, I knew the fire would be roaring and the air would smell of expensive pine and old money, but it would feel like walking into a meat locker. Marco turned off the ignition and looked at me. His jaw was tight. He hated how they treated me, but he hated even more that I kept coming back. I reached over and squeezed his hand, my gloves damp from the condensation on the window. "Just survive dinner," I said. "That is the only goal." He nodded, but his eyes were dark. He knew that with the James family, survival usually cost a piece of your soul. We entered through the heavy oak doors. The atmosphere was exactly as I had feared. The great room was a cavern of luxury, dominated by a stone fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox. My brother, Gavin, was already there, lounging on a leather sofa that cost more than my student loans, swirling a glass of scotch. My younger sister, Tessa, was taking a selfie by the mantel, adjusting her lighting ring. And there, in the center of it all, was Celeste. She looked up as we walked in. She was wearing cashmere the color of fresh cream, her silver blonde hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection. Her eyes swept over my coat, noting the fraying stitching on the cuff, and then moved to Marco's boots. "You made it," she said. Her voice was light, airy, and utterly devoid of warmth. I was worried the sedan would not handle the incline. "We were just placing bets on whether we would need to send the groundskeeper to tow you." Gavin snorted into his drink. "Good to see you too." "Mother," I said, keeping my voice flat. Dinner was a blur of passive-aggressive commentary. The clinking of silverware on fine china sounded like swords crossing. Celeste dominated the conversation, steering it deftly toward Gavin's new venture, a tech startup that seemed to exist entirely in pitch decks and no actual code. She praised his vision. She praised Tessa's recent engagement to a man she had known for 3 weeks. When the conversation turned to me, she asked if I was still doing that computer typing work for pennies. I analyze risk data for corporate mergers. I said, cutting a piece of steak that was rarer than I liked. Celeste waved a manicured hand. "Same thing. It sounds exhausting. And small." The meal concluded, and we moved to the sitting area for the evening ritual. This was usually when Celeste would critique our appearances or discuss the failings of absent relatives. But tonight, the air felt different, heavier. My grandfather, Russell James, was sitting in his high-backed armchair in the corner. He had been silent throughout dinner, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to manage his soup. At 89, Russell was the patriarch on paper, But Celeste had been the de facto ruler for a decade. She treated him like a piece of antique furniture, valuable, but dusty and occasionally in the way. Russell cleared his throat. It was a wet, rattling sound that stopped conversation. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out 3 cream-colored envelopes. His movements were slow, agonizingly deliberate. He looked at us, his eyes watery and unfocused behind his thick glasses. "For my grandchildren," he whispered. His voice was thin, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "A little something, for the winter." He held the first one out to Gavin. Gavin took it with a smirk, not even bothering to say thank you. He ripped it open, glanced at the contents, and let out a sharp, barking laugh. He handed the second to Tessa. She opened hers, her eyes widening in mock surprise. Then she covered her mouth to suppress a giggle. Then, Russell turned to me. His hand shook so violently that the envelope fluttered in the air. I stepped forward and took it gently. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said softly. I opened the flap. Inside was a personal check. It was written in his shaky, spidery handwriting. The date was correct. The payee was my name, and the amount was $20,000. $20,000. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. That amount of money could clear my credit card debt. It could fix the transmission on the sedan. It was 6 months of rent. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then, Celeste's laughter cut through the silence like a whip. "Oh, Daddy," she sighed, shaking her head. "You are having one of your episodes again." Gavin waved the check in the air. $20,000, Gramps. Do you even have 20,000 cents in that checking account anymore? Mom controls the trust now. You know that. Russell didn't answer. He just stared at the fire. Tessa looked at Celeste for cues on how to react. Celeste was smiling, that tight, pitying smile she used when a waiter got an order wrong. "It is sweet, really," Celeste said, walking over to Gavin. "He thinks he is still the CEO. He thinks it is 1995, and he is handing out bonuses." Gavin stood up, walking toward the massive stone fireplace. "This is just sad," he said. He crumpled the check in his fist. "Sorry, Gramps, I don't want to get flagged for fraud trying to cash a senile man's fantasy." He tossed the ball of paper into the roaring flames. It caught instantly, curling into black ash. Tessa followed suit immediately. She didn't want to be the one holding the bag of awkwardness. "Poor Grandpa," she said, crumpling hers. I loved the thought. Though, she threw hers in. Another $20,000, or the idea of it, vanished up the chimney. I stood there, the check warm in my hand. I looked at the numbers again. The ink was dark. The signature, though shaky, was undeniably his. Russell B. James. Celeste turned to me. Her eyes narrowed when she saw I was still holding it. "Valeria," she snapped. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the pity and keeping only the command. "Get rid of it." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because it is cruel to humor him," she hissed. "He does not know what he is writing. That account probably has $5 in it. If you try to deposit that, it will bounce. The bank will call me, and I will have to explain that my father has dementia. Do not embarrass yourself with that prop." "Prop?" The word hung in the air. Marco stepped forward, his face flushing red. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend me, to defend the dignity of the old man sitting in the corner. But I froze. I was looking at Russell. He was slumped in his chair, staring blankly ahead, looking every bit the confused invalid they claimed he was. But then, for a fraction of a second, his head turned just a degree toward me. His eyes met mine. The watery haze seemed to clear, revealing a sharp, steel-gray intelligence that I hadn't seen in years. And then, he blinked. It wasn't a twitch. It wasn't a spasm of old age. It was a slow, deliberate, heavy closure of the eyelids. One long blink, a signal. "Don't." The message was louder than if he had screamed it. "Don't act like them. Don't burn it." The clarity vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He went back to staring at his knees, his jaw slack. Valeria Celeste's voice was a warning shot now. "Give it to me." She reached out and snatched the envelope from my hand. She pulled the check out, sneering at the handwriting. God, look at this scrawl. It is pathetic. She tossed the check onto the coffee table. It landed face up, looking stark and white against the dark mahogany. It is trash. Valeria, she said, turning her back on me to pour herself a glass of wine. Just like your outfit. Seriously, did you buy that coat at a surplus store? Marco lunged. I felt his muscles coil. He was going to say something unforgivable. He was going to scream at her, and then they would kick us out, and we would drive back to Spokane in the dark, angry and defeated, exactly as they wanted. I grabbed Marco's wrist. My grip was iron. I dug my nails into his skin, grounding him. Don't, I whispered, barely moving my lips. He looked down at me, confused by the intensity in my eyes. I wasn't crying. I wasn't trembling. I was calculating. I stepped forward to the coffee table. The room went quiet. Gavin was watching me with amusement, waiting for the tantrum. Tessa was checking her phone. I reached down and picked up the check. I did not crumple it. I smoothed the edge where Celeste's thumb had crinkled the paper. I folded it once, perfectly in half. Then I folded it again. I slipped it into the inner pocket of my coat, right against my heart. Celeste spun around, glass in hand. What are you doing? I told you to burn it. I kept a souvenir. I said, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, detached, distant. I want to remember the gesture. Celeste rolled her eyes. A gesture so dramatic it involved her entire upper body. Fine, keep your scrap of paper. Frame it for all I care. Just do not try to cash it and trigger an audit on my estate planning. She took a sip of wine, dismissing me, dismissing the moment. Oh, that reminds me, she said, her tone shifting to business as if she hadn't just humiliated her father and daughter in the span of 2 minutes. Gavin needs a full brand identity for his pitch deck. He is meeting with investors on Tuesday. She gestured vaguely at me with her wine glass. You can whip that up tonight, right? You have your little laptop with you. I looked at Gavin. He didn't even look up from his drink. He just expected it. The free labor, the late nights, the Valeria will do it safety net. We need a logo, a color palette, and maybe some mock-ups for the app interface. Gavin said, bored, nothing too fancy, just make it look expensive. Don't be selfish. Valeria, Celeste added, seeing that I hadn't immediately agreed. You are here. You are eating our food. Contribute something. Don't ruin the family atmosphere with your moodiness. My hand was inside my coat pocket, resting against the sharp corner of the folded check. I could feel the paper through the lining. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. Sure, I said. I will look at it in the morning. I need it by noon. Gavin said. I grabbed Marco's arm before he could explode. We are going to our room, I said. I have a headache. We walked out of the great room, the sound of their laughter following us up the grand staircase. I could hear Celeste making a joke about my shoes. I could hear the fire crackling, consuming the $40,000 that my siblings had thrown away because they were too rich to care and too arrogant to see. Inside the guest room, the air was frigid. They kept the heating low in the unused wings to save money, a petty irony considering the opulence downstairs. Marco slammed the door behind us. They are monsters. Val, he hissed, pacing the small rug at the foot of the bed. Absolute monsters. And your grandfather God, looking at him just sitting there taking it. It is sick. I didn't answer. I walked over to the nightstand. I pulled the folded check out of my pocket. I laid it next to my phone, Val Marco asked, stopping his pacing. Why did you keep it? You know Celeste is right about one thing. If he is incompetent, that check is piece of paper. It is just going to hurt you when the teller hands it back. I walked to the window. Outside, the snow was falling harder, blanketing the valley in a suffocating white silence. The world looked clean, but I knew what was buried underneath. I thought about Russell's eyes, that single, deliberate blink. It wasn't the blink of a confused man. It was the blink of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. He isn't incompetent. Marco, I said, staring at the reflection of the room in the dark glass. What? He isn't senile. Or at least, not tonight. I turned around. I looked at the check, then at my husband. If they were sure it was fake, Celeste wouldn't have been so scared of me keeping it. She called it a prop. But you don't scream at someone for holding a prop. You scream at them for holding a loaded gun. I picked up my phone. I turned off the notifications for the family group chat. Tomorrow morning, I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. I am not going to design Gavin's logo. I am going to the bank. You are going to try to cash it, Marco asked. His voice low. I am not going to try. I said, I am going to deposit it, and if the money clears… Marco, if that money is real, then everything they have told us for the last 10 years is a lie. I looked back out at the snow. The cold didn't bother me anymore. In fact, for the first time in my life, I felt a fire starting to burn. And it wasn't in the hearth downstairs. It was inside me. I did not ask for permission to be born into this family. I thought, and starting tomorrow, I am done asking for permission to survive them. At 9:03 in the morning, the air in Ketchum was brittle enough to snap. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan, watching the digital clock on the dashboard flick from 9:02. The engine was off, but the metal of the car was still ticking as it cooled. A sound that felt absurdly loud in the quiet of the bank parking lot. I was parked outside Canyon View Bank. It was a structure of stone and timber, designed to look less like a financial institution and more like a lodge where one might sip whiskey after a day of skiing. But it was a bank. It was a place where truth was binary. Either you had the funds, or you did not. There was no room for interpretation, for gaslighting, or for the kind of emotional calculus my mother, Celeste, excelled at. My hand was in my pocket, clutching the folded piece of paper. It had been there all night. I had slept with my coat on a chair facing the bed, waking up every hour to stare at it, terrified that a draft might blow it away, or that Gavin might sneak in and burn it while I dreamt. I took a breath that burned my lungs. I opened the car door. The walk to the glass double doors felt like marching toward a firing squad. Though I could not quite tell if I was the prisoner or the executioner, the lobby smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. It was empty, save for a security guard who looked more interested in the podcast playing through his earpiece than the woman in the surplus store coat walking toward the teller line. There was no line. Of course there wasn't. It was a Tuesday morning in a town where the residents did not run errands. They had assistants for that. I walked straight to the second window. The teller was a woman named Marla. Her name tag was pinned slightly crooked on her blazer. She looked to be about my age, maybe a few years older, with tired eyes and the kind of practiced neutrality that comes from dealing with people who have more money than manners. She was typing something on her keyboard, her eyes flicking back and forth between the screen and a stack of deposit slips. She did not look up immediately. That small delay, that 5-second wait where I stood there invisible, made my stomach turn. It was the same feeling I got at the dinner table when Celeste would talk over me to ask Gavin about his imaginary companies. Finally, Marla stopped typing. She looked up. Her gaze dropped to my coat, then up to my face. She did not smile, but she did not sneer either. She just waited. "Can I help you?" she asked. I pulled the check from my pocket. It was warm from my body heat. I placed it on the marble counter, keeping my hand flat over it for a second before sliding it forward. I unfolded it. The creases were sharp. The handwriting Russell B. James looked even more fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights of the bank than it had by the firelight. Marla looked at the check. She did not touch it yet. She just read the numbers. $20,000. I saw a flicker in her eyes. It was a look I recognized. It was the look of someone calculating the probability of a scene. In a town like this, a $20,000 check was not uncommon, but a $20,000 check handed over by a woman wearing boots that had been resold twice was a discrepancy. Discrepancies usually meant trouble. She picked it up. She held it by the corner, as if it might be contagious. She turned it over to check the endorsement. I had signed it in the car, my pen digging so hard into the paper I was afraid I would tear through it. She looked back at the front. She squinted slightly at the signature. "Do you want to verify this, or do you want to deposit it?" she asked. Her tone was bored, but the question was a trap. If I tried to deposit a bad check, I would get hit with a fee, and worse, the bank would notify the issuer. Celeste would get a call. The humiliation would be administrative, formal, and documented. I looked Marla in the eye. My hands were trembling, so I pressed them against the cool marble of the counter. Locking my elbows, "Verify," I said. My voice came out lower than I intended. Scrapier. "Verify. Right now." Marla sighed. It was a microscopic sound, a tiny exhale of inconvenience. She pulled the check closer to her keyboard. She began to type. Click, 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 click. The sound of her nails on the plastic keys echoed in the cavernous lobby. Each keystroke felt like a hammer hitting a nail. "Please," I thought, "please let it be real." But another voice, the voice Celeste had planted in my head since I was 12, whispered the opposite. "It is a prop. Valeria, you are embarrassing yourself. You are holding up the line for a fantasy." Marla stopped typing. She stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The silence stretched. It expanded, filling the room, pushing against the walls. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Why was she stopping? She squinted at the screen. She reached up and adjusted her glasses. Then she tapped the enter key one more time, harder, as if asking the machine to reconsider what it was showing her. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. The funds were insufficient. The account was closed. Or worse, the account was frozen due to suspicious activity, a safeguard Celeste would have put in place to keep Russell from spending his own money. I prepared myself for the look of pity mixed with annoyance. The "I am sorry, ma'am, but this account does not exist" speech. I was already planning my exit, how I would walk to the car without running, how I would drive until the gaslight came on. Marla looked up at me. Her expression had changed. The boredom was gone, replaced by a mild professional surprise. She reached for a stamp. Thud. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It sounded like a gavel. "It is valid," she said. The world tilted on its axis. I blinked. "I beg your pardon." She pushed a slip of paper toward me. "The funds are verified. The account is active and has sufficient balance. Since it is an on-us check drawn from this bank, the funds are available immediately. Do you want cash, or do you want it all in your checking account?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I had to clear my throat. I had rehearsed being rejected. I had rehearsed being mocked. I had not rehearsed being right. "Deposit," I managed to say, "all of it, into my personal checking." She nodded and went back to typing. The rhythm was different now. It was fast, efficient. The tension in her shoulders had dropped. To her, this was just a transaction. To me, it was a resurrection. She printed a receipt. She tore it off the machine with a sharp zip and slid it across the marble slab along with my ID. "Here you go. Ms. James, have a nice day." I took the receipt. I did not look at it immediately. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I forced myself to walk slowly. Heel, toe, heel, toe. Do not run. Do not scream. You are just a woman leaving the bank. I pushed through the double doors and the cold air hit me like a slap. But this time, it felt bracing. It felt clean. I got into my car and locked the door. Only then did I look at the piece of paper in my hand. The receipt was thermal paper, warm and flimsy. I scanned down to the bottom line. Current balance, $20,412.33. I stared at the number. 20,412. The $412 was mine. It was the sum total of 3 freelance invoices I had chased for weeks. Money I was hoarding to pay for snow tires, so I would not slide off the highway on the way back to Spokane. It was survival money. It was pathetic. Scraped together. "Please don't let the card decline money." And next to it sat the 20,000. It sat there, heavy and undeniable. I looked at the date on the receipt. I looked at the transaction code. It was real. Celeste had lied. It was not a white lie. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not an exaggeration of an old man's declining health. She had looked me in the eye, in front of everyone, and told me the check was a prop. She had told me Russell was senile. She had told me the account was empty. Gavin had burned his because he believed her. Tessa had burned hers because she believed her, but the money was there, which meant Russell was not broke. And if he had access to this account, he was not legally incapacitated. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed instantly by a heat so intense I had to unzip my coat. They had made me doubt my own eyes. When Russell blinked at me, I had wondered if I was projecting meaning onto a muscle spasm. I had doubted him because they trained me to doubt him. They had almost convinced me to burn $20,000 life-changing money for Marco and me just to keep the peace. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. The sound made me jump. The screen lit up. Marco. I stared at the name. Marco. Who loved me. Marco. Who was currently back at the lodge, probably packing our bags, terrified that Celeste was going to evict us before breakfast because I had dared to keep a piece of paper. I picked up the phone. Hello, Val. Marco's voice was a whisper. He must have been in the bathroom or the closet. Where are you? Celeste is asking for you. She is in a mood. She says, if you are not down in 10 minutes to work on Gavin's branding, she is going to cut the weekend short. I listened to his panic. It sounded distant, like a radio broadcast from another country. I looked at the receipt again. 20,412. Marco. I said, did you go to the bank, he asked, his voice tightening. Val, please tell me you didn't actually try to cash it. I don't want to deal with the fallout if they call the cops or it cleared. I said. There was a silence on the other end. A long, staticky silence. What Marco asked. It cleared. Marco, the money is in our account. I'm looking at the receipt, $20,000, available immediately. I heard him exhale, a sound like he had been punched in the gut. But Marco stammered. But Celeste said she said the trust controlled everything. She said he was broke. She said he didn't know what day it was. I looked out the windshield at the snow-covered mountains. They looked different now. Sharp, high definition. She lied. I said, but why? Marco asked. Why would she let Gavin and Tessa burn real money, that is $40,000? Val. Why would she let them throw $40,000 into a fire just to prove a point? I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that hurt my throat. Because $40,000 is the price of admission. Marco, what does that mean? It means she paid $40,000 to test who was loyal to her narrative. I said, she sacrificed that money to see if we would follow her orders even when they made no sense. It was a loyalty test. Gavin failed. Tessa failed. They chose her approval over reality. Val, come back to the lodge, Marco said. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out what to tell them. Tell them nothing. I said, Val. If they were sure it was fake, Marco, I said, cutting him off. If they were truly 100% sure that check was a piece of trash, they wouldn't have been afraid of me keeping it. You don't get angry at a toddler for holding a Monopoly bill. You get angry when someone finds the ledger you hid. I could hear Marco breathing. He was terrified. I understood why. We were waking up in a cage we hadn't realized was locked, and I had just found a key. Do not say a word. I said, I am coming back. But Marco. Yeah. Stop packing. We are not the ones who need to run. I hung up. I sat there for another minute. I took the receipt and placed it on the dashboard. I pulled my phone out. I opened the camera app. I took a photo of the receipt. The numbers were crisp and black. Then I opened my email app. I attached the photo and sent it to my personal email. Then I sent it to a secondary secure cloud storage account I used for sensitive work data. 2 copies, off-site. Then I opened the family group chat. There were 17 unread messages. Most were from Celeste, tagging me, asking where I was. One was from Gavin, a meme about freeloaders. One was from Tessa, a picture of her latte with the caption, Morning Vibes. I did not read them. I did not reply. I went to the settings. Mute notifications, forever. I put the phone down. I picked up the receipt again, folded it carefully. and put it in the zippered compartment of my wallet. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked the same. Same dark hair, same tired eyes, same cheap coat, but the person behind the eyes had changed. Yesterday, I had hope. Hope that they would love me. Hope that if I worked hard enough, designed enough logos, stayed silent enough, they would finally see me as one of them. I didn't have hope anymore. I had clarity. And looking at that receipt, knowing that my grandfather was sitting in that house trapped inside a lie that cost $40,000 to maintain, I realized something else. I had a bankroll. I put the car in reverse. The tires crunched on the packed snow. I drove out of the parking lot, past the stone and timber facade of the bank, and turned back toward the lodge. The road ahead was icy, but I didn't care. I finally knew exactly where I was going. The drive back to the lodge was a blur of white pine and asphalt, but my mind was 300 miles away. In Spokane, Washington, specifically, I was thinking about the dripping faucet in our bathroom. Marco and I lived in a second-floor apartment that smelled permanently of the downstairs neighbor's curry and wet wool. It was a functional space, the kind of place you live when you are doing everything right, but the math of modern existence simply does not add up. Marco worked rotating shifts at a logistics distribution center, wrecking his back and his sleep schedule for $17 an hour. I worked as a remote data analyst for Graybridge Risk Analytics. My job was to look at massive data sets for insurance companies and predict where things might go wrong. I spent my days calculating the probability of flood, fire, and theft, yet I had failed to calculate the probability of my own family robbing me blind. The dissonance between my life and the life inside the James family estate was not just a gap, it was a different gravitational field. For years, the family motto had been a variation of "We are fine." The James family was fine. We had assets. We had history. We had a vacation home in Sun Valley. But whenever the reality of my life in Spokane rubbed up against the fantasy of their wealth, the rules suddenly changed. I remembered the winter the transmission blew on our Honda. It was 2 years ago. The bill was $1,200. We did not have it. We were eating rice and beans to pay down my student loans. The one Celeste promised she would help with, but never did because it builds character to pay your own way. I had called her, desperate, asking for a short-term loan. Not a gift, a loan. I remember her voice on the phone. It was disappointed. It was heavy with the burden of having a daughter who could not manage her life. Valeria. She had sighed. If I give you the money, you will never learn to budget. You have to stand on your own. It is for your own good. I had hung up, ashamed. I took an extra freelance gig transcribing medical audio files for 3 weeks, sleeping 4 hours a night, to pay the mechanic. I felt proud of myself. I felt like I was earning my independence. 1 week later, Gavin posted a photo on Instagram. He was sitting in a Herman Miller chair, surrounded by exposed brick and succulent plants. The caption read, "New HQ for the visionary era. Startup life." He had not started a company. He did not have a product. He had rented a co-working space in downtown Seattle, a private office that cost $3,000 a month because he needed a place to record TikTok videos about hustle culture. When I asked Celeste about it, she did not sigh. She did not talk about character. "It is a strategic investment," she had said, her voice crisp. "Gavin is building a personal brand. You have to spend money to make money. Valeria, you would understand that if you had any business acumen, that was the toxic mathematics of the James family. Money spent on Gavin was an investment, a necessary injection of fuel into a rocket ship that never seemed to launch. Money spent on me was a handout, a sign of moral failure, a drain on the family resources. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The receipt in my wallet felt hot against my hip. It wasn't just the car repairs. It was the laptop incident. That was the one that truly burned. 6 months ago, my laptop died. It was my livelihood. I needed a specific processor speed to run the heavy data modeling software for Graybridge. The machine cost $2,500. I asked Celeste if I could borrow the money from the family trust, the trust that was supposedly set up to support our professional endeavors. She had laughed, a cold, sharp sound. You always want the newest toy. Don't you? You are so materialistic. Valeria, try saving up like a normal person. I lost 2 contracts because I couldn't process the data in time. I eventually bought a refurbished machine on a credit card with 24% interest, 2 days after she denied me. Celeste bought Tessa a purebred French bulldog puppy for $4,000 because Tessa was feeling emotionally unmoored after a breakup. They called it kindness. That was the trap. Celeste used the word kind like a cudgel. If I accepted their insults with a smile, I was being sensible. If I sat through dinner while Gavin mocked my job, I was being a good sister. But the moment I pointed out the disparity, the moment I asked why Gavin got a seed round of funding for an app that didn't exist, while I couldn't get a loan for a tool I used to pay taxes, I was ungrateful. I was the daughter who kept score. That was my crime. But as I drove back toward the lodge, the snow-covered trees blurring past, my analyst brain began to connect a different set of data points. There was the matter of my grandmother's legacy. Grandma James had passed away 5 years ago. She was a woman of quiet defiance, much like Russell used to be before the fog set in. I remembered a conversation with her in her greenhouse, the smell of damp earth and orchids heavy in the air. She had held my hand, her skin like papery parchment. "I have put something aside for you, Val," she had whispered, "for your education, for when you want to build something of your own. I never saw a dime. When the will was read." Celeste explained it with a sad shake of her head. "Market fluctuations," she had said. "The estate took a hit in the housing crash. Grandma got confused about the numbers. There is nothing left in that specific bucket. Sweetie, I am so sorry. I believed her. Why would a mother lie about a dead grandmother's wish? I assumed Grandma, in her old age, had simply overestimated her wealth. But now that I knew Russell, a man Celeste claimed was penniless and senile, had a checking account with at least $60,000 in it, purely to fund a prop, the variable changed. If she lied about Russell, she lied about Grandma. And then there was the credit score. A chill that had nothing to do with the Idaho winter crawled up my spine. 2 years ago, right around the time I was applying for an apartment in Spokane, my credit score had taken a sudden, violent dip. It dropped 70 points overnight. I panicked. I pulled the report. It showed a high utilization on a credit line I didn't recognize, a line associated with a bank I didn't use. I had called Celeste in a panic, asking if any family accounts were linked to my social security number by mistake. "Oh, that," she had said, her voice smooth as glass. "It is just a clerical error at the bank. The family accountant mixed up your file with Gavin's. Don't worry. I will have them scrub it. It is just a system glitch." The score rebounded a month later. I was relieved. I thanked her. I thanked her for fixing a problem I now realized she might have created. Why would my credit drop? Because someone maxed out a line in my name. Why did it go back up? Because someone paid it off. Or because someone moved the debt. Gavin had gone to Europe that month. He stayed in 5-star hotels. He posted photos of champagne and designer luggage. I slammed on the brakes as I approached the turn for the lodge. The tires skidded slightly on the ice, but I corrected the drift with a calm I didn't feel. I parked the car away from the main entrance. Hidden behind a row of oversized SUVs that belonged to Celeste's guests, I sat there for a moment, breathing in the cold air of the car, letting the rage crystallize into something useful. I walked into the lodge. The house was quiet. It was mid-morning, the time when the rich slept in or went to the spa. I went straight to our guest room. Marco was there. He wasn't packing, but he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered. His eyes were red-rimmed. "You are back," he said. I took off my coat and hung it up. I did not take the receipt out of my wallet. I wanted it to stay there, a secret weight against my body. "Did anyone see you come in?" he asked. "No." Marco stood up. He walked over to me and took my hands. His palms were sweaty. "Val, I have been thinking. We need to be careful. You deposited the money. Fine. It is real. But if we fight them, if we make this a war, What if they cut us off completely? I looked at him. I loved him. He was a good man, a hard-working man, but he had been beaten down by years of watching me get whipped by my family. He had internalized their power. Cut us off from what, Marco? I asked softly. From the family, he said. From the safety net. I mean, I know they don't help much, but if something really bad happened, if one of us got sick, if we lost the apartment, they are the only backup plan we have. If you humiliate Celeste, she will close the door forever. I pulled my hands away gently and walked to the window. I looked out at the sprawling grounds, the heated driveway, the guest house that was bigger than our entire apartment building. Marco, I said, turning to face him, we don't have a safety net. We have a leash. He stared at me. They didn't help with the car, I said, counting on my fingers. They didn't help with the laptop. They didn't help when you broke your wrist and we had to pay the deductible. They didn't help when we needed a co-signer for the lease, but they might. Marco argued weakly. In an emergency, no, I said, they wouldn't. They keep the idea of help dangling in front of us like a carrot, so we will keep performing for them. So I will keep doing Gavin's work. So we will keep showing up to these dinners to be their audience. I walked over to the desk where my laptop sat closed. I thought about the credit score. I thought about the ghost of Grandma's money. You are afraid they will cut the string. Marco, I said, you think we are kites and they are holding us up? But we are not kites. We are puppets. And they are not holding us up. They are just jerking us around to make us dance. Marco sat back down on the bed. The fight went out of him. He knew I was right. He had just been too scared to say it. So what do? He whispered. That $20,000, it helps. Val, it really helps. But it is not enough to fight them. They have lawyers. They have millions. I touched the wallet in my pocket. You are right, I said. $20,000 does not buy us a new life. It doesn't even buy us a house. I looked at the locked door of our room. But it buys us an audit, I said. Marco frowned. What it buys us, the ability to hire a forensic accountant, I said, or a lawyer who isn't on their payroll. It buys us the entrance fee to the truth. I picked up my laptop. I am not going to design Gavin's logo. I said, I am going to make a spreadsheet. I am going to write down every date, every promise, every weird financial glitch we have ignored for the last 5 years. I looked at Marco. They think money is a weapon to keep us in line. I said, they forgot that money also leaves a trail. The door handle rattled. Valeria Celeste's voice came through the wood, muffled but commanding. Are you in there? Gavin is waiting for those mock-ups. We have lunch in an hour. Don't be late. I looked at Marco. He looked terrified. I walked to the door. I didn't open it. I just leaned my forehead against the wood. I will be down soon. Mother, I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a professional risk analyst who had just identified the primary threat. I turned back to Marco. The $20,000 didn't save us, I whispered, but it just bought us the shovel we need to dig up the bodies. The drive to the stone cottage took less than 2 minutes, but it felt like crossing a border between 2 hostile nations. The main lodge, where Celeste held court, was a monument to new money trying to look old. It was all high beams, expansive glass, and heated floors that hummed with expensive energy, but the stone cottage was different. It was the original structure on the property. Built by my great-grandfather before the family fortune had swollen into the monstrosity it was today. It sat deep in the tree line, a small, stubborn building made of river rock and slate. Celeste hated it. She refused to step foot inside. She claimed it smelled of damp wool and old paper. But I knew the real reason. It was the only place on the estate where she could not control the lighting. I parked the sedan on the gravel patch outside. I did not knock. I used the key I had kept on my ring for 15 years, a small brass key that Celeste had likely forgotten existed. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of cedar and beeswax. It was quiet, not the empty silence of the lodge, but the heavy, thoughtful silence of a library. Russell was sitting by the north window. He was not slumped in his chair. He was not shaking. The blanket that had been draped over his knees the night before was folded neatly on the ottoman. He was wearing a thick wool cardigan, and in his hands, which were perfectly steady, he held a hardcover book. He did not look up when the door latched behind me. "You did it," he said. His voice was clear. The wheezing rattle was gone. It was the voice I remembered from my childhood. The baritone that used to read me stories about knights and dragons before the family stopped believing in dragons and started worshipping equity. I stood by the door, my hand still clutching the strap of my bag. I deposited it. I said. Russell turned a page. He did not look at me yet. "I know," he said. "If you had burned it, you would still be at the lodge, trying to design a logo for a company that does not exist to please a woman who cannot be pleased. But you are here, which means you chose the hard way." He finally looked up. His eyes were sharp. The cloudy, watery film that he had projected at dinner was gone. It was a terrifying transformation. It made me realize how much energy he must have been expending to play the part of the fading patriarch. "You made them think you were losing your mind." I said. It was not a question. Russell closed the book and placed it on the side table. He gestured to the leather armchair opposite him. "Sit down, Valeria. We do not have much time before your mother realizes you have gone rogue." I sat. The leather was cold against my jeans. Why, I asked. Why the act? Why let them humiliate you like that? Gavin threw your money into the fire. And you just watched. Russell leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Because, my dear, in this family, competence is a threat." He looked out the window at the snowy woods. "Your mother," he continued, "has been building a case for legal conservatorship for the last 18 months. She has been documenting every slip, every forgotten name, every spilled cup of tea. She has a lawyer in Boise drafting the papers. The moment I show any resistance, the moment I try to stop her from spending the principal of the trust, she will use that aggression as proof of my cognitive decline. She will say I am paranoid. She will say I am becoming belligerent. And a judge, seeing a well-dressed, concerned daughter and an angry old man, will sign her the keys to the kingdom." I felt a chill go through me. It was a trap, a perfect, velvet-lined trap. "So you play the fool," I whispered. "I play the harmless invalid," he corrected. "I let them think I am already gone. It makes them careless. It makes them talk in front of me. It makes them think they don't need to hide their tracks because the only witness is a senile old man who blinks too much." He looked at me intently, but I needed to know if I had an ally. I needed to know if there was anyone left in this family who valued reality over the performance. That was the check. I said. Russell nodded. "I knew Gavin and Tessa would burn it. They are addicted to your mother's approval. They would burn their own birth certificates if Celeste told them it was good for the aesthetic. But you," he smiled. A sad, weary smile. "You hesitated. You looked at me. You saw me." I gripped the arms of the chair. "It wasn't just a test. Grandpa, I needed that money." "I know," he said softly. "I know about the freelance struggles. I know about the apartment in Spokane. I know about the car repairs." My head snapped up. "How I may be playing dead, Valeria. But I am not dead. I still see the statements. I still see the credit inquiries. Which brings us to the question you are afraid to ask." I swallowed hard. The question had been burning in my throat since I left the bank. "Grandma's legacy," I said. "The education fund. The money she told me she left for me." Russell's face hardened. The lines around his mouth deepened. He did not answer immediately. He took a slow breath, and for a second, he looked all of his 89 years. "I suspect it is gone," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. "Suspect?" I asked. "Or no, I know the money was moved." He said, "I saw the transfer 3 years ago. $250,000. It was moved from the subtrust designated for you into the general operating fund, and then funneled out to an LLC registered in Nevada." Nevada? Gavin's startup was registered in Nevada. I felt sick, physically sick. "Did you sign for it?" I asked. Russell shook his head. "No, that is the leverage. I never authorized that transfer. But if I accuse her now, without the physical proof, without the audit trail, she will claim I instructed her to do it and forgot. She will use the accusation as the final nail in the coffin of my sanity. Poor Dad. She will say, "He is imagining thefts. He leaned back. That is why I needed you to deposit the check. I needed a transaction that she could not deny. I needed to prove that my signature is still valid, that the bank still recognizes my authority, and that she is terrified of an audit." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a harsh, jarring sound in the quiet cottage. I ignored it. It buzzed again, then again, a long, sustained vibration that meant a call. "Answer it," Russell said. "Put it on speaker." I pulled the phone out. "Mother?" I tapped the screen and set it on the table between us. Valeria Celeste's voice filled the room. It was tight, high-pitched. "Where are you? Gavin has been waiting for 40 minutes. We need those files. The investors are looking for a mood board." I looked at Russell. He was watching me, his face impassive. He gave me a tiny nod. I took a breath. "I am not doing the files." "Mother?" Silence. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a woman who had never heard the word no from a subordinate. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I said, I am not doing it." I repeated, "I am not designing Gavin's logo. I am not making his pitch deck. I am not working for free anymore." "Valeria," Celeste snapped, "you are being hysterical. Is this about the check? Is this about that little scrap of paper? Do not tell me you are sulking because I told you to throw away a prop." "It wasn't a prop," I said. "Oh, grow up," she shouted. "It was a piece of paper from a confused old man. Now get back to the lodge. You are ruining the weekend. You are being selfish, ungrateful, and frankly, you are embarrassing yourself. Gavin needs this. The family needs this. Stop acting like a child and do your duty." I looked at Russell. He was smiling. It was a cold, predatory smile directed at the phone. "I am not coming back to the lodge," I said. "I am staying in the cottage for a while." The cottage Celeste sounded revolted. "What are you doing in that dusty hole? Is your grandfather there?" "Yes," I said. "He is sleeping." "Good. Let him sleep. He is useless anyway. Just like you are being right now." She hung up. The disconnection tone beeped once. Then silence returned to the room. "They call it family," Russell said quietly, picking up his teacup. "But they run it like a master runs a servant." He took a sip. "She is scared," he said. "She is angry. Yes. But underneath that, she is terrified. She knows you have the money. She knows you are not falling in line. And she knows that if you are talking to me, you might be learning things she has spent 5 years burying." I looked at the phone, then at him. "So what do we do?" I asked. "I have $20,000. It is enough for a lawyer, but not a big one. Not one who can fight Harlan Sloan. We do not need to fight them yet." Russell said, "We need to invite them in." He stood up and walked to a small writing desk in the corner. He opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh sheet of stationery. "I am going to call a meeting," he said. "A meeting I'm going to call Celeste. I am going to tell her that I had a moment of clarity. I am going to tell her that I am feeling my age and that I am ready to sign over the full power of attorney and the control of the estate to her." I stared at him. "Grandpa, no, that is suicide. That is giving her exactly what she wants." Russell uncapped a fountain pen. "It is a Trojan horse." "Valeria," he said. He began to write. "I will tell her I want to sign everything over, but I will have one condition. A condition that sounds like the rambling of an old man who wants to settle his affairs." He looked up at me, his eyes gleaming. "I will tell her that before I sign the big estate over, I need to clear my conscience. I need to make sure my grandchildren were treated fairly. I will demand a clean, independent audit of the specific trusts left by your grandmother. I will say I cannot rest until I see the papers proving that your education fund is intact." I understood. If she produces the audit, she has to put the money back. I said, "She has to replace the $250,000 she stole." "Exactly," Russell said. "And she doesn't have it. Gavin spent it. And if she refuses the audit, I asked, then she cannot get the signature, Russell said. And if she tries to force it, if she tries to declare me incompetent after I have made a reasonable request for financial transparency. Any judge will look at that and see a daughter trying to hide theft, not a daughter trying to help a sick father. It forces her into the light. I said, it forces her to manufacture evidence, Russell corrected. He finished writing and capped the pen. She will not put the money back because she can't. So she will do what she always does. She will try to fake the records. She will try to present a forged audit to the meeting. He handed me the paper. It was a list of names, lawyers, forensic accountants. But she doesn't know that you analyze data for a living, Russell said. She thinks you just type on computers. She doesn't know that you can spot a doctored PDF from a mile away. He leaned back, looking satisfied. We are going to let her forge the documents. Valeria, we are going to let her walk into that meeting with a stack of lies. And then, when she is sitting there, smug and safe, you are going to take her apart. I looked at the list of names. I looked at my grandfather, the man who had played the fool to save the kingdom. This isn't about the money anymore, is it? I asked. Russell shook his head. No, he said, it is about the truth. It is about the fact that they looked at us, you and me, and decided we were barely human. They decided we were scenery. He stood up and walked to the window. Watching the snow fall on the pines, I am tired of being scenery. Valeria, are you? I thought about the prop comment. I thought about the years of being called a leech while I worked 60-hour weeks. I thought about Marco's fear. I stood up. Call the lawyer. I said, set the meeting. Russell turned back to me. One more thing. He said, from this moment on, you are not my granddaughter. In that room, you are my auditor. You do not speak to them as family. You speak to them as data points. Can you do that? I touched the receipt in my wallet. The fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard precision. I can do that. I said, good, Russell said. Now go back to your room. Do not design the logo. Just wait. And when she comes screaming, let her scream. The louder she is, the more mistakes she will make. I walked to the door. Grandpa, I said. He looked up. Thank you. For the check. He winked. A real wink this time. Don't spend it all in one place. Kid, we have a war to fund. I stepped out into the cold air. The wind was biting. But I didn't button my coat. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel everything. I walked back toward the lodge, toward the woman who thought she owned me, ready to watch her build the stage for her own execution. The phone sat in the center of the scarred oak table like an unexploded bomb. Russell cleared his throat. He took a sip of water, adjusted his collar, and then looked at me. He didn't say a word, but the shift in his demeanor was instantaneous. His shoulders slumped forward. His jaw went slack. The sharp, calculating intelligence in his eyes dimmed into a watery, confused haze. He wasn't just my grandfather anymore. He was a method actor preparing for the performance of a lifetime. He tapped the speaker button with a trembling finger. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring, Celeste picked up. What now? She snapped. Her voice was sharp, impatient. The tone she used for telemarketers and service staff who brought the wrong appetizers. I am in the middle of a crisis with Gavin. Dad, if you are calling to ramble about the good old days, I do not have time. Russell let a beat of silence pass. When he spoke, his voice was thin and reedy, laced with a pathetic sort of desperation. Celeste, he wheezed, I have been thinking about what she demanded, about the house, about the trust. I held my breath. I was sitting across from him, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. I am tired. Celeste, Russell said, the fight, it is gone out of me. You were right at dinner. Maybe I am slipping. Maybe I shouldn't be in charge of the accounts anymore. The silence on the other end was electric. I could practically hear the gears in Celeste's head grinding to a halt, shifting from aggression to opportunism. I want to avoid trouble later, Russell continued, his voice wavering perfectly. I want to sign it over, the power of attorney, the estate management, all of it. I just want to rest. The change in Celeste's voice was so abrupt, it was almost nauseating. The ice melted instantly, replaced by a sugary, condescending warmth that was somehow even more chilling. "Oh, Daddy," she cooed. "Of course you do. That is the most sensible thing you have said in years. You have been carrying this burden for too long. I have been telling you. I am here to help. I am here to take care of everything. We can do it tomorrow," Russell said. "I don't want to wait. My mind, it feels clear today. But I don't know about tomorrow." "I will call the lawyers," Celeste said, her words tumbling out fast, eager to close the deal before the old man changed his mind. "We can meet at the lodge. I will have Dorian Harlan bring the papers over in the morning." "No," Russell said. He said it softly, but firmly enough to stop her momentum. "No lodge," he said. "I want to go to the office, Harlan and Sloan, in Boise. I want it done properly, in a boardroom, with witnesses." I watched Russell's eyes. They were hard as flint, staring at the phone while his voice remained feeble. "And Celeste, there is one thing." "What is it?" "Daddy, anything you want. My conscience," he said. "It bothers me. Before I sign the big book over to you, I need to see the little books." "Little books?" Celeste asked. Her voice had tightened just a fraction. "The grandchildren," Russell said. "Your mother's legacy. I promised her I would watch over those accounts, specifically Valeria's education fund. I have this nagging fear that I messed it up, that I lost it." I leaned in closer to the phone. "This was the moment. I need you to bring the full file," Russell said. "The statements from the last 5 years, the balance sheets. I need to see them with my own eyes. I need to know the money is safe. Once I see that, once I sign off on that audit, I will sign over the rest of the estate to you immediately." The silence that followed was heavy. It was not the silence of a bad connection. It was the silence of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down, and realizing she had forgotten her parachute. If the money was there, if the accounts were clean, she would have said, "No problem. Daddy, I will print them out." She didn't say that. 1 second passed, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence stretched out, agonizing and revealing. In the world of risk analysis, a 3-second pause in a negotiation is a confession. It means the data point you just requested does not exist. Celeste, Russell asked, pitching his voice up in a panic. "Are you there?" "Did I lose the money?" "Finally." She spoke. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was brittle. It was the sound of someone smiling while holding a knife. "I am here, Dad. Don't be silly. Of course the money is safe. Everything is transparent. We have always been impeccable with the records. Then you will bring them," Russell pressed, "to the meeting." "Yes," Celeste said. The word was clipped. "I will bring everything. Noon tomorrow. Harlan and Sloan. Now, get some rest. You sound exhausted." She hung up without saying goodbye. Russell let out a long exhale and dropped his head back against the chair. He closed his eyes. "Did you hear it?" he asked, his voice returning to its normal, commanding timbre. "I heard it. I said—" The pause. Russell said. She hesitated. She hesitated because the files don't exist. I said, I stood up and began to pace the small room. If the money was in a trust, she could have pulled the statement up on her phone in 30 seconds. She didn't. She stalled. "She is in a panic," Russell said. He opened his eyes and looked at me. "And panic makes people sloppy. She has 24 hours, I said, my mind racing. "She has until noon tomorrow to produce 5 years of bank statements for an account that she drained years ago. She will forge them," Russell said calmly. "Yes," I said, "she has to. It is the only play she has left. She cannot admit the money is gone, or you won't sign the estate over, and she wants that estate more than she wants air. So she will spend tonight inventing a reality where the money is still there." Russell leaned forward. "Can you catch her?" I stopped pacing. I looked at my grandfather. "Grandpa, I work for Graybridge. I analyze fraud for a living. I don't just look at the numbers. I look at the pixels." I pulled my laptop out of my bag and set it on the table. "If she was smart," I said, opening the lid, She would hire a professional forger in Hong Kong to build a synthetic paper trail. But she isn't smart. She is arrogant, and she is in a rush. She will try to do it herself, or she will make Gavin do it. Gavin, Russell scoffed. The boy who thinks blockchain is a type of jewelry. Exactly. I said, they will use templates they find online. They will use PDF editors, and they will make mistakes. I sat down and logged into my secure workspace. I don't just want to prove the document is fake, I said. Typing a quick note to myself, any lawyer can argue a clerical error on a bad document. I need to prove intent. I need to prove the chain of custody. I looked at Russell. I need to prove who created the file, when they created it, and what device they used. I need to catch them with the ink on their hands. The door to the cottage opened. We both jumped. It was Marco. He slipped inside quickly, closing the door behind him and locking it. He was breathing hard, his face flushed from the cold. He was carrying a heavy duffel bag. I got it, he said. Got what Russell asked. Marco dropped the bag on the floor. It clanked. The backups, Marco said. He looked at me. Val told me to get everything offline. I had texted him 5 minutes before Russell made the call. Pack the hard drives, get the physical files, assume the cloud is compromised. Marco unzipped the bag. Inside were 3 external hard drives, my old tablet, and a stack of physical folders he had retrieved from our car. I also pulled the dashcam footage from the sedan, Marco said, his voice shaking slightly. Just in case. In case of what Russell asked. In case she tries to say we weren't here, Marco said. Or in case she tries to say Val stole the check. Or, he looked at me, his eyes wide. Val. If she realizes what we are doing, what if she calls the police? What if she accuses you of hacking? You are logging into the family server. Right, I am not hacking, I said calmly. I have had administrative access to the family server for 10 years. I set it up. They never revoked my credentials because they forgot I have them. It is not hacking if you have a key, but she will spin it, Marco insisted. She will say you are stealing data. She will say you are blackmailing her. Let her, Russell said. He stood up and walked over to Marco, placing a hand on his shoulder. Son, listen to me. They rely on fear. They rely on the fact that you are a nice person who is terrified of conflict. They use the law like a bludgeon. But tomorrow we are bringing our own bludgeon. Marco looked at the old man, then at me. I am not scared of conflict. Marco said quietly, I am scared of them hurting Val. I stood up and walked over to him. I kissed his cheek. They can't hurt me, I said. Not anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I am not asking them to love me. I am asking them to show their work. I turned back to the table. We have a long night ahead of us, I said. Marco, I need you to set up a mirrored backup of everything I find, air-gapped. Nothing touches the internet once I download it. On it, Marco said, unzipping a pouch of cables. Russell, I said, I need you to write down every date you remember asking about the trust, every conversation, every excuse she gave you. I need a timeline to overlay with the data I find. Russell picked up his pen. I remember every single lie. He said, I sat down at the computer. I cracked my knuckles. The countdown had started. Across the estate, in the main lodge, Celeste and Gavin were likely panicking. They were probably shouting at each other. Opening laptops. Searching for bank statement template editable. They were rushing to build a facade of honesty. They didn't realize that in the digital world, creation is destruction. Every time they touched a file, every time they saved a fake document, they were leaving a fingerprint. I opened the terminal on my laptop. I typed in the IP address of the home server, the server I had built for them in college, so Gavin could store his pirated movies and Celeste could save her high-resolution photos of herself. I hit enter, password access. Granted. I smiled. They hadn't changed the password. It was still James Family Win. I am in, I said. The screen filled with directories. I navigated past the photos, past the movies, straight to the folder labeled Financials. I saw the cursor blink, and then a new folder appeared. New folder 2. Then It was renamed Trust Docs Final. I watched it happen in real time. It was like watching a burglar try to pick a lock while you are standing on the other side of the door watching through the peephole. "She is making them right now," I whispered. "Record it," Russell said. "I am capturing the screen," I said, "and I'm logging the metadata." I watched as files began to populate the folder. Statement_2022.pdf. Statement_2023.pdf. They were digging their own graves, 1 kilobyte at a time. "Let them work," I said, leaning back. "We will let them finish their masterpiece, and tomorrow, at noon, we will frame it for them." Outside, the wind howled against the stone walls of the cottage, but inside, the only sound was the hum of the hard drives and the scratching of Russell's pen. The heist was on, but we weren't stealing money. We were stealing the one thing they couldn't afford to lose: the narrative. For 10 years. I was the invisible mechanic of the James family engine. I was the one they called when the Wi-Fi did not reach the pool house. I was the one who set up the mesh networks, the encrypted backups, and the shared cloud folders so Celeste could show off her vacation photos on any screen in the estate. I was the one who migrated their entire digital life from disorganized hard drives to a streamlined server. They never paid me for this. They called it contributing to the household. They treated my technical skills like a parlor trick, useful but essentially blue-collar work that was beneath them. Because they viewed technology as a service, like plumbing or catering, they made a critical error. They assumed the person who built the house did not keep a key. They never changed the admin passwords. Why would they? In their minds, I was too afraid of them to snoop. I was Valeria the mouse, Valeria the pleaser. They did not fear the IT guy, because they did not respect the IT guy. I sat at the small wooden desk in the stone cottage, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. Next to my computer, I had propped up an old iPad. It was a second-generation model I had configured for Russell 5 years ago so he could read his newspapers digitally. He rarely used it, preferring physical paper, but it was still logged into the family ecosystem. It was my window into the crime scene. Marco sat behind me, watching the screen over my shoulder. He was tense, his breathing shallow. Russell was in his armchair, eyes closed, listening to the hum of the hard drives as if it were a symphony. "Watch this," I whispered. I pointed to the iPad. A small icon in the corner was spinning. The cloud sync was active. "They are uploading," I said. The file names began to appear in the shared directory, popping into existence one by one like ghosts manifesting in a graveyard. Statement_template_2 021.docx legacy_account_final_draft ... summary _for_attorney_v3.pdef. They were not even trying to hide their work. They were working directly in the shared folder, likely because Gavin was too lazy to save locally and re-upload. They were building the lie in real time. And I had a front row seat. I opened the folder on my laptop. I did not open the files yet. I copied them. I copied the entire directory to the air-gapped hard drive Marco had set up. "Now, let us see what they made," I said. I opened the file labeled statement_trust_2024.pdf. On the surface, it was perfect. It had the Canyon View Bank logo in the top left corner, crisp and blue. It had the correct font. It had the layout of columns and rows that looked exactly like a legitimate bank statement. The ending balance showed $258,000.42. Marco let out a low whistle. "It looks real. Val, it looks real to a human." I said. I opened a forensic PDF analysis tool software I use daily at Graybridge to detect altered insurance claims. But let us see what it looks like to a computer. I ran the file through the analyzer. The screen flashed, decomposing the document into its constituent layers. A legitimate bank statement is generated by a database. It is a single, flattened layer of data. It is born digital. This document was a Frankenstein monster. "Look at the text layers," I said, pointing to the chaotic map of bounding boxes on the screen. See how the numbers are not aligned on the same baseline as the text. See how the font for the balance is Arial, but the font for the transaction descriptions is Helvetica. I clicked on the Metadata tab. This was the digital fingerprint. Metadata is the story the file tells about itself, a story that most amateurs forget to delete. I read the data aloud. Created today. Time, 1:17 in the morning. I looked at Marco. They were up late last night. Application Adobe Acrobat Pro. Original source Word document. And then, the smoking gun. Author Robert's MacBook Pro. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Robert was my father. He died 12 years ago. His laptop was a relic, a heavy aluminum brick that Celeste kept in her office because she claimed it had sentimental value. In reality, she kept it because it had an old version of Photoshop she didn't want to pay a subscription for. They are using Dad's computer, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, hot anger. They are using a dead man's laptop to forge the theft of his mother's legacy. It was a mark of supreme arrogance. They didn't think anyone would look. They thought the file would be printed out, handed to a lawyer, and glanced at for 5 seconds. They didn't think anyone would check the digital birth certificate of the document, but I wasn't done. I zoomed in on the account number listed at the top of the fake statement, account number 884209115. I opened a separate browser window and pulled up the routing protocols for Canyon View Bank. Do you know what a checksum is? I asked Marco. He shook his head. It is a mathematical algorithm used to validate numbers. I explained. Bank account numbers follow a specific formula. The last digit is a check digit, calculated from the previous digits. It prevents typos. I typed the number from the statement into my validator tool. Result invalid. I laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound. Gavin made up the number. I said, he just typed random digits. This account number is mathematically impossible. It cannot exist in the Canyon View system. I scrolled down to the bottom of the page, to the signature of the supposed bank officer, a Jonathan P. Miller. I switched the view to wireframe mode. The signature wasn't part of the document. It was an image file floating on top of the text. I clicked on it and checked its properties. Source image. Google_image_signature_sample_04.jpg. They downloaded a stock photo of a signature. I said, they didn't even try to vector it. They just pasted a JPEG on top of the PDF. It was sloppy. It was insulting. It was the work of people who believed they were untouchable. People who believed that reality was whatever they said it was. But then, I found something else. I was navigating through the directories, looking for more source files, when I clicked on a folder named Taxes. Inside, nestled among Celeste's legitimate tax returns, was a file that didn't belong. I froze. Why is there a credit authorization file with my name in the tax folder? I whispered. I double-clicked it. It was an application for a high-limit credit card from a major national lender. The application was dated 4 years ago. The applicant was Valeria James. The Social Security number was mine. The income listed was $150,000, 3 times what I was making at the time. But the address listed on the application was not my apartment in Spokane. It was P.O. Box 492 Ketchum, Idaho, Celeste's private P.O. Box. Marco leaned in, his breath hitching. Val, look at the date. I looked. October, 4 years ago. That was the year my credit score tanked. I said, the words tasted like ash in my mouth. That was the year I couldn't get approved for the apartment. The year I had to beg a friend to co-sign because my utilization ratio was through the roof. I scrolled to the second page. There was a signature. Valeria James. It looked nothing like my signature. It looked like Celeste's handwriting trying to be jagged. Marco made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Do you remember? He asked, his voice thick with realization. Do you remember when we got that letter from the bank? The one that said, important account information. It was forwarded to us by mistake. I nodded slowly. I remembered. It had arrived at our old apartment, tattered and taped shut. I called your mom. Marco said, I was panicked. I thought someone had stolen your identity. And she told me. He stopped. his face paling as the memory realigned itself with the truth. She told me, "Oh, don't worry, Marco. It is just junk mail. They send those pre-approved offers to my address sometimes because Val used to live here. Just shred it. I will handle it so you don't get spammed." "I handle it," I repeated. She didn't handle it. She intercepted it. I opened the monthly statements associated with that card. They were in a subfolder. November 2019, $4,000. Luxury retreat. Bali. December 2019, $2,500. Nordstrom. January 2020, $3,000. Ski equipment. I stared at the screen. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with a vibration of pure, unadulterated rage. "She used my credit," I said. "She opened a card in my name, maxed it out on vacations and clothes, and then paid the minimums from the family account to keep it from going to collections. That is why my score dropped. That is why it bounced back when she finally paid it off. She stole your future," Marco whispered, "for a ski trip." I looked at Russell. He had opened his eyes. He was watching me with a profound, sorrowful gravity. "They did not just take your grandmother's money," he said softly. "They took your name." I turned back to the computer. I did not scream. I did not cry. I went to work. "I need a full extraction," I said to Marco. My voice was robotic. "I need to preserve the chain of custody. If we just copy the files, they can claim we altered them." I opened a command line interface. I began to run cryptographic hash functions on every single file. "What are you doing?" Marco asked. "I am hashing them." I said, "I am generating a unique alphanumeric string for each file. If even one pixel changes, the hash changes. This proves that the files I have right now are identical to the files on their server at this exact second." I took screenshots of the metadata. I took screenshots of the folder structures. I exported the edit history logs from the server, which showed exactly which user account had created the fake PDFs. I downloaded the credit card application. I downloaded the statements showing the spending. "I am not just building a defense for the meeting," I said, typing furiously. "I am building an indictment." I created a new folder on the external drive. I named it the _evidence. I dragged the fake bank statements into it. I dragged the fraudulent credit application into it. I dragged the metadata reports into it. I looked at the screen one last time. The cursor on the iPad was still spinning. They were still working, still refining their lies. Unaware that I had already captured the rough draft that would destroy them. "They think this is a family dispute," I said, closing the laptop lid. "They think we are going to argue about feelings and memories." I looked at Marco, then at Russell. "This isn't a dispute anymore. This is a felony." I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, covering the world in white. But inside the stone cottage, everything was coming into focus. I patted the pocket of my coat, where the $20,000 receipt still sat. It felt small now, trivial. "We are ready," I said. Russell nodded. He picked up his book, but he didn't open it. "Then let us get some sleep," he said. "You will need your energy. Tomorrow. You are not just an auditor. You are the executioner." The conference room at Harlan and Sloan was a mausoleum of dark mahogany and thick glass, suspended 20 floors above the streets of Boise. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested the firm wanted to keep its clients awake and uncomfortable. I sat on one side of the massive oval table, my laptop closed in front of me. Next to me sat Russell. He was delivering the performance of his life. He was huddled inside his oversized beige cardigan, his hands trembling visibly on the polished wood surface. His mouth was slightly open, and he blinked with a rhythmic, confused sluggishness. To anyone watching, he was a man whose mind was dissolving like sugar in hot tea. Across from us sat Dorian Harlan, the senior partner. He was a man who looked like he had been born wearing a three-piece suit. He was checking his watch, clearly expecting this to be a formality. A signature, a handshake, and a lucrative estate transfer fee. The heavy glass doors swung open. Celeste and Gavin walked in. They did not look like people who had spent the night forging federal documents. They looked like royalty. Celeste was wearing a structured navy blazer with gold buttons, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Gavin was wearing a suit that was too tight in the shoulders and too short in the ankles, the uniform of the modern tech entrepreneur. They carried the energy of inevitable victory. "Sorry we are late," Celeste breezed, setting a designer leather portfolio on the table. The traffic coming out of Sun Valley was dreadful. She glanced at Russell with a pitying smile. "Hi, Daddy. You look comfortable." Russell did not answer. He just stared at a water pitcher in the center of the table. Celeste turned her gaze to me. The smile vanished, replaced by the blank, dismissive look one gives to a piece of office equipment that is slightly out of place. "Valeria," she said, "I see you decided to join us. Try not to make a scene today." "All right, this is grown-up business." I said nothing. I just nodded. Dorian Harlan cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" he asked. "Mr. James has requested a review of the ancillary trusts before executing the final transfer of the estate." "Celeste, I understand you have prepared the documents." "Absolutely," Celeste said. She opened the leather portfolio and pulled out a thick stack of papers. She slid them across the table to Harlan. "It is all there, Dorian, every penny accounted for. In fact," she said, casting a benevolent look at me, "Valeria should be thanking me. The education fund has actually grown under my stewardship. We moved it into some aggressive growth ETFs a few years back. The balance is quite healthy." Gavin leaned back, crossing his arms. "Diversified portfolio," he added. "High yield. We leveraged the volatility." He used the words like he had heard them on a podcast but didn't quite know what order they went in. Harlan picked up the documents. He leafed through them. He adjusted his glasses. "This looks in order," Harlan said. "Standard statements from Canyon View Bank." He looked at Russell. "Russell, do you want to review these?" Russell's head bobbed shakily. He gestured toward me with a trembling hand. "Valeria," he croaked. His voice was a dry whisper. "My eyes are bad. You look... Put it on the screen." Celeste rolled her eyes. A small theatrical sigh escaped her lips. "Honestly, Daddy, is that necessary? Dorian has already checked them. I want to see," Russell insisted, his voice cracking. Celeste turned to me. Her face was a mask of irritation. "Fine," she snapped. "Valeria, hook it up. The cable is over there. Be useful for once." She slid a USB drive across the table toward me. "Here is the digital copy. Make it quick. We have a lunch reservation at 1. I took the drive. It felt cool and light in my palm. I plugged it into my laptop. I connected the HDMI cable. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright blue rectangle on the far wall. I opened the drive. There was one file, trust_audit_final ... PDF ... I double-clicked it. The bank statement filled the wall. It was magnificent. The logo was crisp. The numbers were bold. It showed a balance of $258,000. "See," Celeste said, gesturing to the screen. "Transparency. Now, can we sign the papers?" I did not look at her. I looked at Dorian Harlan. "Mr. Harlan," I said. My voice was steady, the voice I used when presenting a risk assessment to a board of directors. "Before we proceed, I need to verify the integrity of this document." Harlan looked at me, surprised by the change in my tone. "Go ahead, Ms. James." I hit a key combination on my laptop. I switched the display from the standard PDF viewer to my forensic analysis suite. The screen changed. The clean, white document was suddenly overlaid with a grid of red and green lines. Data boxes popped up on the side. "What is this?" Gavin asked, sitting up straighter. "What is she doing? I'm looking at the layers." I said. I zoomed in on the date field at the top of the statement, on a legitimate bank statement. I said, addressing the lawyer. "The text and the background are flattened into a single layer. They are generated simultaneously by the bank's server." I moved my mouse. I clicked on the date, January 20th, 2026. I dragged it. The date moved. It slid right off the page, leaving a blank white space behind it. I clicked on the balance, $258,000. I dragged it. It floated across the screen like a sticker. "This document is not a bank statement," I said. "It is a collage. It is a composite image created by layering text boxes over a template." Celeste stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she said. Her voice was climbing an octave. "She is manipulating it. She is hacking the file right now, Dorian. Make her stop. Sit down." "Celeste," Harlan said. His voice was no longer polite. It was the voice of a man who was realizing his malpractice insurance might be at risk. "Continue, Ms. James." I opened the metadata tab. The text on the screen was large enough for everyone to read. Creator tool, Adobe Acrobat Pro. Original source, Microsoft Word. Creation date today, 1:17 in the morning. Author Robert's MacBook Pro. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the fan of the projector. I looked at Celeste. She was pale, her mouth slightly open. She was staring at the words, Robert's MacBook Pro, as if they were the ghost of her dead husband pointing a finger at her. "My father died 12 years ago," I said. "His laptop is in your study. Mother, Canyon View Bank does not generate monthly statements at 1 in the morning on a personal laptop that hasn't been updated since 2014. But I am not done," I said. I opened the second file, the one I had extracted from their server the night before, the one they didn't know I had, the credit card application. I dragged it onto the screen. "This," I said, "is an application for a platinum credit line. It was submitted 4 years ago. It lists the applicant as Valeria James." I zoomed in on the signature. "That is not my signature," I said. Then I zoomed in on the IP address logged in the application's footer. I pulled up a second window showing the IP history of the James family estate. The application was submitted from the same IP address as the family lodge. I said, "At a time when I was living in Spokane, working 2 jobs, and trying to figure out why my credit score had just dropped 70 points. I turned to look at Gavin. He was sweating. He was wiping his upper lip with the back of his hand. "And the funds from the trust?" I asked. The $250,000. I pulled up a visualization of the transfer history Russell and I had mapped out. "It wasn't invested in ETFs," I said. "It was wired to an LLC in Nevada. An LLC listed under the name Visionary Ventures." I looked at Gavin. "Gavin, isn't that the name of the shell company you used to lease your co-working space in Seattle?" Gavin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Celeste. He looked at the door. Celeste slammed her hand on the table. Enough, she screamed. The veneer of the socialite shattered. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly, raw fury. "You little snake," she hissed at me. "You ungrateful, jealous little snake. You have always been like this, always keeping score, always trying to ruin everything because you can't stand that you are not special." She turned to Harlan, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She forged this. She is an IT person. She knows how to do this. She created these fake files to frame me because she wants the money. She is broke. She drives a 10-year-old car. She is desperate." She looked at Russell. "Daddy, tell them she is lying. You know she is unstable. You know she has always been the problem child." Russell stopped shaking. It happened in an instant. The tremor in his hands ceased. He sat up straight, his shoulders squared. He took a deep breath, and the wheezing vanished. He looked at Celeste. His eyes were clear, cold, and utterly lucid. "Sit down. Celeste," he said. His voice was a boom. It was not the whisper of an invalid. It was the voice of the man who had built a dynasty from timber and grit. Celeste froze. She looked at her father as if he had just risen from the dead. "Daddy," she whispered, "I am not senile." "Celeste," Russell said. His voice was hard as granite. "And I am not blind." He placed his hands flat on the table. "I knew the money was gone," he said. "I knew you stole it years ago, but I knew that if I accused you, you would use your lawyers to paint me as incompetent. You would have locked me away in a home and taken the rest." He gestured to me. "I asked for the audit because I knew you couldn't produce it." He said, "I knew you would try to fake it, And I knew that Valeria was the only one smart enough to catch you. He looked at Gavin, then back at Celeste. I didn't bring you here to sign over my estate, he said. I brought you here to get your fingerprints on a felony. Dorian Harlan stood up. He buttoned his jacket. His face was pale. This meeting is adjourned, Harlan said. His voice was clipped, professional, and terrified. He looked at Celeste. Ms. James, Harlan and Sloan can no longer represent you. Given the evidence presented regarding the falsification of financial documents and potential identity theft, we are legally obligated to report this to the probate court. What? Celeste gasped. Dorian, you can't be serious. It is a misunderstanding. It is a family matter. It is fraud, Harlan said. And it happened in my conference room. He pressed a button on the intercom. Susan, freeze the transfer protocols on the James estate and call security to escort Ms. James and Mr. Flores out of the building. Celeste looked around the room. Her eyes were wild. She looked at Gavin, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at Harlan, who was refusing to make eye contact. Then she looked at me. There was no anger left in her eyes, only shock, the shock of a predator realizing that the rabbit had brought a gun. You did this, she whispered. You destroyed this family. I closed my laptop. I pulled the USB drive out. I didn't destroy anything. Mother, I said, I just turned on the lights. Russell stood up. He walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't look at Celeste. Come on, Valeria, he said. Let us go get some lunch. I believe I promised you a meal. We walked out of the conference room. We didn't look back. Behind us, I heard Celeste start to scream. A high, desperate sound that was cut off as the heavy glass doors swung shut. We walked out of the Harlan and Sloan building into the bright, biting cold of the Boise afternoon. The sky was a hard, indifferent blue. The silence that had filled the elevator ride down was heavy. But it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the ringing silence that follows an explosion. I adjusted my scarf, feeling the cold air hit my face, expecting to feel triumphant. I had just exposed a decade of lies. I had watched the color drain from my mother's face. I had watched the most powerful lawyer in the state fire her. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Winning against your family doesn't feel like victory. It feels like an amputation. You survive, but you leave a part of yourself on the operating table. My phone began to buzz in my coat pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a call. I ignored it. It stopped, then started again immediately. I pulled it out. Mother? I stared at the screen. The name flashed with a desperate urgency. I declined the call. 5 seconds later, a voicemail notification popped up, then a text, then another call. I looked at the text preview. Valeria, pick up the phone. We need to fix this before it gets out of hand. I swiped it away. Another text. If you think you can humiliate me and walk away, you are wrong. You are destroying this family for money. Swiped away. Another text. 1 minute later. Val, honey, please, I am shaking. I don't know what happened back there. I think Dorian is confused. We just need to talk. Just us. No lawyers. Please. I looked at Russell. He was leaning heavily on his cane, his breathing slightly labored. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the traffic passing by, his eyes distant. She is cycling, I said, holding up the phone. She went from threat to negotiation to victimhood in under 3 minutes. Russell nodded slowly. It is the narcissist's prayer, he said, his voice rough. I didn't do it. And if I did, it wasn't that bad. And if it was, that's not a big deal. And if it is your fault. Before I could answer, the glass doors of the lobby burst open behind us. Valeria. It was Gavin. He had lost the swagger he walked in with. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loosened as if he was suffocating. He ran up to us, ignoring Russell completely. You need to go back up there, he said, his voice breathless and high. You need to tell Harlan that you made a mistake. You need to tell him the files were corrupted or a prank. I looked at my brother. For the first time, I saw him not as the golden child, but as a man in his 30s who had never actually grown up. He looked terrified, like a teenager who had crashed his dad's car. A prank, I asked. You think federal fraud is a prank? Gavin. You don't understand, he shouted, stepping into my personal space. Marco stepped forward, placing himself between us, but I put a hand on Marco's chest to hold him back. I didn't need protection from Gavin. He was toothless. My investors, Gavin said, his eyes wide and wet. I have a term sheet on the table for the new app. If this gets out, if there is a fraud investigation attached to my name, they will pull the funding. You are bankrupting me. Val, you are ruining my future. I looked at him calmly. What funding? Gavin, I asked. The seed round. I cut him off. The only funding you have ever had was the $250,000 stolen from Grandma's trust. I said, there are no investors. Are there? It is just you. Recycling family money through a shell company in Nevada to make it look like revenue. Gavin's face turned a blotchy red. That was my money, he spat. Grandma wanted me to have it. She knew I was the one who was going to do something big. You are just a worker drone. You don't know how to build anything. So you admit it? I asked. You admit you spent it. He faltered. He realized, too late, that he was shouting a confession on a public sidewalk. I invested it. He stammered. It is gone. Okay. The market turned. It is gone. He looked at me with a sudden, pathetic pleading. Val, please. If Mom gets charged, they will come for me too. I signed some of those papers. She made me sign them. I stared at him. I remembered the years of him mocking my cheap car. I remembered him laughing when I burned my hand on the stove at Christmas while cooking the dinner he refused to help with. I cannot help you. Gavin, I said, you mean you won't? He sneered. I mean I can't. I said, the math doesn't work. You spent $250,000 you didn't earn on a lifestyle you couldn't afford. The bill is due. I turned away. Come on, Grandpa. Gavin stood there, shouting something about loyalty, but his voice sounded thin, swallowed by the noise of the city. We walked to Marco's car. As we were getting in, Russell stumbled. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. His knee just buckled. He grabbed the doorframe, his knuckles turning white, and let out a sharp, ragged gasp. Grandpa? I dropped my bag and grabbed his arm. Marco was there instantly, taking his weight on the other side. I am fine. Russell wheezed. His face had gone a terrifying shade of gray. Just winded. He wasn't fine. He was 89 years old, and he had just spent 24 hours orchestrating a high-stakes sting operation against his own daughter. The adrenaline that had sustained him in the conference room was gone, leaving behind a frail, exhausted body. We need to get you to a doctor, I said, my heart hammering. No, Russell said, shaking his head. No doctors. Just take me to the cottage. I need to sleep. I just need to sleep. We helped him into the back seat. He leaned his head against the cool window and closed his eyes. I watched him in the rearview mirror as Marco pulled out into traffic. I felt a surge of anger that was hotter than what I felt toward Gavin. They did this to him. I thought, they forced him to play dead for 5 years just to survive in his own home. They made him terrified to show competence because competence meant they would drug him or lock him away. That was the real crime. The money was just numbers. The theft of his dignity was unforgivable. My phone buzzed again. I expected another threat from Celeste. It was a text from Tessa, my younger sister, the one who had laughed while burning her check, the one who always followed Celeste like a shadow. I opened the message. Val, I am sorry. I didn't want to burn it. I stared at the words. A second message appeared. She knows about my credit card debt. I owe $30,000 on store cards. She told me if I didn't take her side, she would tell fiancé's parents. His family is conservative. They would call off the wedding. I was scared. I let out a short, bitter breath. Of course, it wasn't just affection that held the James family together, it was blackmail. Celeste didn't build relationships. She built leverage. She collected secrets like ammunition. She had Tessa's debt. She had Gavin's fraudulent LLC. She had my failures. She kept everyone in a state of suspended terror, making herself the only savior who could keep the wolves at bay. I didn't reply to Tessa. I didn't have the energy to offer absolution. She was a victim, yes, but she was also an accomplice. She had chosen her comfort over the truth. Just like the rest of them. Marco reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I said. He kept his eyes on the road. "I am sorry," he said. "About what?" "About wanting to run," he said. "About telling you to pack your bags. I was so used to seeing you small. Val, I was used to seeing you take it. I thought that was just how the world worked. The James family wins, and we survive." He squeezed my hand. "But watching you in that room, watching you take that file apart, I realized I have been wrong. You aren't small. You were just crouching." I looked at him. I saw the man I fell in love with. The man who was kind and steady, but who had let his fear of my family dictate our marriage. "I don't need you to fight them, Marco," I said quietly. "I don't need a knight. I can fight them myself. You saw that." "I know," he said. "But I need you to stand next to me," I said. "When she calls, and she will call you, Marco, she will try to charm you or threaten you. I need you to not waver. I need to know that when I look to my left, you are there. Not packing bags, not looking for the exit, just there." Marco nodded. He lifted my hand and kissed the knuckles. "I am here," he said. "I am not going anywhere." We dropped Russell off at the stone cottage. I helped him into bed. Tucking the quilt around him, he looked small in the dim light. "Did we get them?" he whispered, his eyes barely open. "We got them, Grandpa," I said. "Now sleep." I walked out to the main room where Marco was setting up the laptop. "The lawyer called while you were in there," Marco said. "Dorian Harlan." I sat down at the table. My body felt heavy, like I was moving through water. "What did he say?" "He is filing a formal report with the probate court tomorrow." Marco said. "He has to. He said the evidence of document forgery is irrefutable. He is resigning as the executor of the trust. He recommends we hire our own criminal attorney because..." "Because what?" "Because Celeste isn't going to go down quietly." Marco said. "Harlan said she was screaming in the lobby that you hacked the server. She is already trying to spin the narrative." I nodded. I expected that. I opened my laptop. I logged into my social media accounts. I hadn't posted anything in months. But my feed was suddenly active. My aunt had posted a status, "So sad when children lose their way and attack the parents who sacrificed everything for them," praying for my sister Celeste. A cousin had commented, "I heard Val is in some kind of financial trouble. Desperate people do crazy things." Another comment from a family friend, "Hacking your own grandfather." That is a new low. It had begun. Celeste knew she lost the legal battle. The data was too clean. So she was moving the war to the only battlefield where facts didn't matter, the court of public opinion. She was poisoning the well. She was painting me as the unstable, greedy daughter who had manipulated a senile old man and fabricated evidence to extort the family. She was using the hacker angle. It was clever. To the Luddites in our family. IT professional was basically synonymous with wizard who can fake anything. Marco looked at the screen over my shoulder. "We should reply," he said angrily. "We should post the screenshots. We should show them the fake bank statement." "No," I said. "Why not?" "They are lying about you. Val." I closed the browser tab, because that is what she wants. I said, "She wants a catfight. She wants me to get emotional, to start posting angry rants, to look unstable. If I start arguing in the comments section, I look just as crazy as she does." I opened a spreadsheet. I am not going to fight her with Facebook posts. "Marco, I am going to fight her with a timeline." I began to type. Incident log, 2021 to 2026. Item 1, unauthorized credit inquiry. Item 2, trust fund transfer to Nevada, LLC. Item 3, forged canyon view. Statement hash, ID 8. A 4F. I am going to compile every piece of data we have into a single, undeniable dossier, I said, and when the police, or the district attorney, or the probate judge asks for my side of the story, I am not going to give them a sob story. I am going to hand them a USB drive. Marco watched me work. You are terrified, aren't you? He asked softly. I paused. My hands hovered over the keys. Yes, I admitted. Why we won the meeting? Because I know my mother. I said, I looked out the window at the darkening woods. She doesn't care about the money. Marco, she has enough money hidden away. She cares about the story. She has spent 30 years writing a story where she is the saint and I am the disappointment. Today, I burned that script. I turned back to him. She won't stop until she destroys my credibility. She will try to get me fired from Graybridge. She will try to get you fired. She will try to prove Russell is insane. I typed another line into the spreadsheet. Target reputation defense. This wasn't the end. The meeting at Harlan and Sloan was just the opening shot. I had taken their king. But Celeste still had plenty of pawns, and she would sacrifice every single one of them to keep from losing the game. I worked through the night. I didn't feel tired. I felt the cold, hard clarity of a soldier digging a trench. I knew the bombardment was coming, but this time, I wasn't standing in the open. I was dug in, and I had the receipts. The counterattack did not begin with a scream. It began with a decline at a gas station pump. I was standing in the freezing wind at a Chevron on the edge of Ketchum, trying to fill the tank of the sedan. We needed to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. I swiped my debit card. Transaction declined. I frowned. I swiped it again. Refer to issuer. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I expected to see the $20,400. I expected to see the buffer that Russell had given me. Instead, I saw red text. Account status frozen. Pending investigation. A notification popped up at the top of the screen. We have detected unusual activity on your account regarding a recent deposit. The issuer has flagged the instrument as stolen/unauthorized. All funds are held until further notice. I stared at the pump. The cold plastic nozzle felt like ice in my hand. She did it. Celeste had called the bank. She had reported the check as stolen. She knew she couldn't prove it was fake. We had already established the funds were real, so she was attacking the chain of custody. She was claiming I had stolen the check from a vulnerable elderly man. It was a classic rich person's weapon, the bureaucracy. She knew that an investigation would take weeks, maybe months. She knew that while the bank investigated, I would be starved out. I couldn't pay a lawyer with frozen assets. I couldn't even pay for gas. I paid with Marco's credit card, the one that was nearly maxed out, and drove back to the stone cottage. My hands were shaking on the wheel. This was not just about the money anymore. This was a siege. When I walked into the cottage, Marco was standing by the table, his face pale. He was holding my laptop. Val, he said. His voice was tight. You need to see this. I walked over. The screen was open to my work email. My corporate account at Graybridge Risk Analytics. There was an email from the Chief Compliance Officer. The subject line was immediate suspension of access pending internal review. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dear Ms. James, we have received a formal complaint alleging that you have utilized Graybridge proprietary software and company hardware to conduct unauthorized intrusion into private servers for personal gain. The complaint includes allegations of data theft and digital harassment, effective immediately. Your access to all company systems has been revoked. Please make yourself available for a call with legal tomorrow at 9 a.m. I sat down heavily in the chair. She went for my career. She didn't just want to win the argument about the estate. She wanted to make sure that even if I won, I would have nothing left. She knew that an allegation of unauthorized intrusion, even if unproven, was a death sentence in the risk analysis world. Who would hire an analyst accused of hacking her own family? She is trying to nuke you. Marco whispered, Val. She is trying to destroy everything. I looked at the email. The complaint was obviously from her. She had probably used buzzwords she heard in movies. Cyberstalking, hacking, data breach. I took a deep breath. The panic was there, fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird, but I forced it down. I forced my brain to switch back to analyst mode. She made a mistake, I said. Marco looked at me like I was crazy. A mistake, Val. You are suspended. Your bank account is frozen. She made a tactical error, I said. She put it in writing. I opened a new document on my personal laptop. She accused me of unauthorized intrusion. I said, but I can prove authorization. I looked at Russell. He was awake, sitting up in bed, listening. Grandpa, I said, did you give me the password to the server 10 years ago? I did, Russell said clearly. And did you ever revoke that access? Never. And the device I used to access the bank records, I asked. The iPad, I asked you to set it up. Russell said, I asked you to manage it. I turned back to Marco. It is not hacking if the owner of the system asks you to be there. I said, and regarding the data theft, I was acting as an auditor appointed by the primary trustee. I started typing a response to my compliance officer. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to attach the affidavit Russell had signed yesterday granting me audit powers. I was going to turn this inquiry into a demonstration of my skills, not a confession of guilt. But something was still nagging at me. The bank statements, the ones Celeste had forged. Why didn't I ever see the real ones I knew she had stolen the money? I knew she had moved it to Nevada. But in the years before the theft, there should have been paper trails. There should have been quarterly updates mailed to me or emailed to me. I was the beneficiary, by law. The bank had to send them. I never got a single letter. I never got a single email. I opened my old personal email account, the one I had used since high school. The one Celeste knew. I went to the settings. I clicked on filters and forwarding. And there it was. My stomach dropped. It was a rule, buried deep in the logic of the inbox. Rule ID Auto Clean. If sender contains Canyon View, or bank, or trust, then forward to Celeste, James family, net and delete from inbox. I stared at the creation date. 6 years ago, I did the math. 6 years ago, I was home for Christmas. I had left my laptop open in the kitchen to help Gavin set up his gaming console. Celeste must have walked by, seen it open, and spent 30 seconds ensuring I would remain blind for the rest of my life. Marco leaned in. He saw the rule. Jesus, he hissed. She didn't just intercept the mail. She intercepted the digital mail too. And then, Marco's eyes went wide. He grabbed my arm. The insurance photos, he said. What do you remember? Marco asked, his voice rising with excitement. 3 years ago, we were visiting for Thanksgiving. Celeste came into our room. She said she was updating the family insurance policy. She said she needed photos of our driver's licenses and social security cards. I nodded. I remembered. It seemed like a responsible, matriarchal thing to do. She took photos of them on her phone. Marco said, she didn't write the numbers down. She took high-resolution photos. I felt a cold chill. She used those photos to open the credit line. I said, she had my ID. She had my social. She had the forwarding rule to catch the alerts. She had the P.O. box to catch the physical cards. It was a perfect ecosystem of control. She had built a cage around me so transparent, I didn't even know I was inside it until I tried to walk through the glass. My phone buzzed. I looked at it, expecting another threat. It was an audio file, from Tessa. I hesitated. Tessa was compromised. Was this malware? Was this a trap? Under the file, there was a text. I'm sorry. Val. I can't stand up to her in person. But I was recording when she called Aunt Linda. Please don't hate me. I pressed play. The sound was tinny, recorded from inside a pocket or a purse. There was the sound of a car engine. Then Celeste's voice. It was loud, shrill, and completely unmasked. The little bitch thinks she can audit me. I built this life for them. I took that money because Gavin needed a runway. Valeria would have just wasted it on rent or student loans. She doesn't know how to use capital. She never knew the money was gone. I made sure of it. If she hadn't found that damn check, she would have lived her whole sad little life without knowing a thing. The recording ended. The silence in the cottage was heavy. She admitted it. Marco whispered, She admitted she took it because she didn't think you deserved it. I saved the file. I backed it up to 3 different clouds. This is it. I said, this is the intent. This proves it wasn't a clerical error. It was a strategic decision to defraud a beneficiary based on personal bias. My phone buzzed again. Gavin. I didn't answer. A moment later, a text appeared. Val. Look, Mom is going crazy. She's talking about suing everyone. I can't do this. I have $10,000. I can wire it to you. Just drop the data. Please. I will pay you back the rest when my app launches. Just delete the file about the Nevada LLC. I stared at the screen. $10,000. That was his price for my integrity. He just admitted the debt. I said, offering a partial repayment is an admission that the principal exists. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I added it to the dossier. We have everything. I said, we have the forgery. We have the credit card fraud. We have the email forwarding rule. We have the recording of the confession. And we have the attempted bribery. I looked at Russell. We can go to the police now. I said, we have enough to get her arrested. Russell looked at me. He looked tired, but his eyes were fierce. If we go to the police, he said, she will fight it for years. She will hire expensive defense attorneys. She will drag your name through the mud in the press. She will make it about a Melikaikis dispute. What do you want to do? I asked. I want to end it, Russell said. Tonight. He sat up straighter. Call the financial representative, he said. The one from the firm that handles the main estate. Not Harlan. The neutral one. And call a notary. Why we are going to have one last family meeting, Russell said. But this time, it won't be in a lawyer's office. It will be at the lodge, in the living room, where she feels safe. He looked at the timeline I had built on my screen. She thinks she has frozen you out, Russell said. She thinks freezing your bank account and calling your boss has stopped you. She thinks she has bought herself time to rewrite the story. He smiled. A grim, hard expression. We are going to show her that she has run out of time. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the independent financial advisor Russell had on his contact list. Valeria, Marco said. Are you sure? If we go back to the lodge, it is going to be a bloodbath. I looked at the text from Gavin. I looked at the email from Graybridge. I remembered the $20,000 check, the prop that had started it all. It isn't a bloodbath. Marco, I said, it is an autopsy. I stood up, packed the laptop. I said, bring the projector. We are going back. We are going back, I said. And this time, we aren't leaving until the truth is the only thing left standing in that room. I looked at the notification from the bank one last time. Account frozen. She thought she could freeze me. She thought money was the only fuel I had. She forgot that I had spent my whole life running on empty. I didn't need money to finish this. I just needed the light. Let us go, I said. We walked out to the car. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the snow. The James estate lay ahead, glowing with warm light, a beautiful rot-filled palace waiting for the match. The conference room at Sterling and Vance was a study in aggressive neutrality. The walls were beige, the carpet was gray, and the air smelled of nothing. It was the kind of room designed to strip emotion out of money, which made it the perfect setting for the end of the James family dynasty. We sat on one side of the long table, me, Marco, and Russell. Opposite us sat Celeste and Gavin. Tessa sat slightly apart from them, staring at a ficus plant in the corner as if it were the most interesting thing she had ever seen. Celeste looked impeccable. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit, her makeup flawless, her posture rigid, but there was a tightness around her eyes, a brittleness to her movements that betrayed her. She thought she still had cards to play. She thought the freeze on my bank account and the suspension from my job had crippled me. She thought I was there to surrender. The independent financial auditor, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like a disappointed school principal, sat at the head of the table. Beside him was a notary. "Shall we begin?" Henderson asked. Russell cleared his throat. He did not look at Celeste. He looked at his hands, which were folded on the table. "I am tired," Russell said. His voice was low, heavy with an exhaustion that wasn't feigned. I want peace. I just want to be done with this. Celeste's eyes lit up. It was a predatory spark. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into that soothing, manipulative register she had perfected over 3 decades. Of course, Daddy, she said. That is all we want, too. Peace, stability. If you just sign the restatement of the trust today, we can put all this ugliness behind us. We can get you back to the lodge. We can get you proper care. She slid a document across the table. It was the transfer of authority, the keys to the kingdom, and Valeria, Celeste added, turning her gaze to me. Her eyes were cold, dead things. Once this is signed, I am willing to call the bank and the team at Greybridge. I can tell them it was a misunderstanding. I can make the investigation go away. But only if we stop this nonsense right now. It was a bribe wrapped in a threat. Surrender, and I will let you have your life back. Russell looked at the paper. He picked up a pen. Celeste held her breath. Gavin smirked, a nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. Russell held the pen over the signature line. Then, he set it down. I want peace, Russell repeated, but peace requires truth. Valeria. I stood up. I did not have to plug in a projector this time. I did not have to shout. I simply opened a thick, bound dossier I had placed on the table. I slid one copy to Henderson. I slid one copy to Celeste. What is this? Celeste asked, not touching it. It is the audit you forgot to do. Mother. I said. I opened my own copy. Exhibit A. I said, the receipt from Canyon View Bank, dated yesterday morning. Verified funds, $20,412. Celeste waved a hand dismissively. We know about the stolen check. Valeria, it wasn't stolen. I said, and it wasn't a prop. It was a valid instrument drawn on a solvent account, which proves that Russell James is compos mentis and financially active. I turned the page. Exhibit B. I continued. The digital forensic report on the document titled Trust Audit Final. I looked at Gavin. He flinched. This document was created at 1:17 in the morning on a laptop registered to Robert James. I said, the account number listed does not satisfy the checksum algorithm used by Canyon View Bank. The signature is a low-resolution JPEG. I looked at Henderson. Mr. Henderson, I said, this is a forgery. It was created to conceal the fact that the $250,000 education fund established by my grandmother is gone. Celeste laughed. It was a high, forced sound. This is absurd, she said. The money is there. It is just moved. I moved it to protect it. To protect it, I asked. Yes, Celeste snapped. You were young. You were reckless. I moved it to a secure holding company. I turned the page. Exhibit C, I said. The holding company. Visionary Ventures, LLC. Registered in Nevada. Sole signatory. Gavin James. I looked at my brother. Gavin, I said, would you like to explain to Mr. Henderson why a secure holding company spent $18,000 on a launch party for an app that was never coded? Gavin turned pale. He looked at Celeste. Mom said it was an investment. He squeaked. She said I could use the seed capital. Shut up. Gavin. Celeste hissed. I turned the page again. Exhibit D. I said. My voice was getting quieter. Colder. This one is my favorite. I said. I pointed to the screenshot of the email settings. For 6 years. I said. Every piece of financial correspondence sent to me was automatically forwarded to Celeste James and deleted from my inbox. I looked at my mother. You didn't just steal the money. I said. You blinded me. You set up a digital filter to ensure I would never see a statement, never see a balance, never see the theft. Celeste stood up. She was trembling now, but she was still fighting. I did it to protect you, she screamed. Her composure shattered. You are weak, Valeria. You always have been. You would have wasted that money on rent, on useless things. I kept it in the family, I managed it. I am the only reason this family has anything left. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor. You didn't protect me. Mother, I said, you consumed me. Protection doesn't need my passwords. I said, protection doesn't need to forward my mail. Protection doesn't open a credit card in my name and spend $10,000 on a ski trip while I am being denied an apartment lease. Celeste froze. You know about the card, she whispered. I know everything. I said, I have the IP addresses. I have the metadata. I have the receipts. I closed the dossier. I am not weak. Mother, I am the one who kept the score. Celeste looked around the room. She looked at Henderson, who was reading the dossier with a look of horror. She looked at the notary. She looked at Gavin, who was staring at the table. She realized she was losing the narrative, so she played her final card. Daddy, she said, turning to Russell. Tears welled up in her eyes, instant. Practice tears. Daddy, look at what she is doing. She is attacking me. She is attacking your daughter. I have taken care of you for 10 years. I fed you. I housed you. I managed everything. Maybe I made some aggressive financial moves, but I did it for us, for the legacy. She reached for his hand. Please, Daddy, don't let her destroy us. Sign the paper. We can fix this. I am your daughter. Russell looked at her hand. He didn't take it. He looked at Henderson. Mr. Henderson, Russell said. His voice was steady. Is the integrity clause still active in the primary trust? Henderson looked up, surprised. Yes, Mr. James, it is a standard clause, though rarely invoked. Russell turned to Celeste. Do you remember the integrity clause? Celeste, he asked. Celeste frowned. What mother put it in? Russell said, 40 years ago, she said that wealth without character is just fuel for a fire. He leaned forward. The clause states that any beneficiary found to have committed fraud, forgery, or theft against the estate, or another beneficiary shall immediately forfeit their status. They are to be removed from the trust permanently. Celeste's face went white. No, she whispered, that is just legal jargon. You wouldn't— I don't have to, Russell said. The clause is self-executing upon proof of malfeasance. He pointed to the dossier. That is the proof. But Celeste stammered, but it is just her word against mine. It is her data. She hacked it. You can't prove intent. Russell reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. He placed it on the table. Tessa sent me this, Russell said. He pressed play. The room filled with the sound of a car engine. And then, Celeste's voice, loud, arrogant, and undeniable. The little bitch thinks she can audit me. I built this life for them. I took that money because Gavin needed a runway. If she hadn't found that damn check, she would have lived her whole sad little life without knowing a thing, just as long as she doesn't know. The voice on the recording laughed. Then the money is still mine. Russell stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. That sounds like intent to me, Russell said. Celeste stared at the phone. Her mouth opened and closed. But no words came out. The mask was gone. There was no confident matriarch left. There was just a thief who had been caught on tape, Dorian Harlan, who had been standing quietly in the back of the room, finally stepped forward. He wasn't her lawyer anymore. He was an officer of the court protecting his license. Ms. James, Harlan said. His voice was grim. Based on the evidence presented, the forgery, the admitted embezzlement, and the identity theft, I am legally obligated to freeze all assets associated with your name pending a criminal referral. He looked at Henderson. The transfer of the estate is cancelled. The trust will revert to the control of Mr. Russell James, with an immediate independent audit to be scheduled. Celeste looked at Gavin. Gavin, she shrieked, do something. Tell them Gavin stood up. He looked at his mother. He looked at the dossier that detailed his fake company. She made me do it, Gavin said. His voice was shaking. She told me it was my money. She told me Valeria didn't deserve it. I didn't want to sign the papers. She forced me. You coward. Celeste screamed. She lunged across the table, grabbing at his lapel. You spineless little parasite. I gave you everything, Security Henderson shouted. 2 guards stepped in. They pulled Celeste back. She was panting, her hair coming loose, her eyes wild. She looked at Tessa. Tessa, she pleaded. You know I love you. Tell them, Tessa looked up from the plant. She had tears streaming down her face. You didn't love us. Mom, Tessa whispered, you just owned us. Celeste looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. The hatred there was pure and concentrated. You think you won? She spat. You have nothing. You are nobody. You will always be the girl who wasn't good enough. I stood up. I picked up my coat. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I am not the girl who wasn't good enough. Mother, I said, I am the auditor, and your account is closed. I turned to Russell. Are you ready? Grandpa Russell nodded. He stood up, leaning on his cane, looking taller than he had in years. I am ready, he said. We walked out of the room. We didn't look back at Celeste. We didn't look back at Gavin, who was crying into his hands. We didn't look back at the wreckage of the family. We walked out into the lobby, past the receptionist, and out the front doors. The air outside was cold and clean. Marco put his arm around me. It is over, he said. I nodded. My phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Account status active. Balance $20,412. And then, another notification. From Graybridge. Subject reinstatement. Dear Ms. James, based on the documentation provided regarding your authorization, I swiped the notifications away. I didn't feel like jumping for joy. I didn't feel like popping champagne. I just felt light. The weight of 30 years of obligation, of trying to please people who could not be pleased, was gone. We got in the car. Where to? Marco asked. Home, I said, to Spokane. What about the estate? Russell asked from the back seat. It is yours. Grandpa, I said, you can hire a team to manage it. Real managers. I don't want it. I don't want their house. I don't want their crystal. I looked out the window at the receding skyline of Boise. I just want my life back. 2 days later, I was back in our apartment in Spokane. The faucet was still dripping. The neighbor's curry still smelled strong in the hallway. I sat at my desk. I opened the drawer. Inside was the receipt. The thermal paper was already starting to fade, the numbers becoming ghost-like. Next to it, I placed a small USB drive, the dossier, the truth. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mother? She was calling from a blocked number. Or maybe a lawyer's phone. It didn't matter. I watched the screen light up. I watched the name pulse. I thought about answering. I thought about hearing her beg. Or threaten. Or blame. I thought about the satisfaction of telling her to go to hell one last time. But then I realized something. Answering was a transaction. It was an exchange of energy. And I was done investing in a bankrupt entity. I pressed the side button. Call declined. I turned the phone over. I looked at the receipt one last time. $20,000. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to retire. But it was enough to buy the most expensive thing in the world. It bought me the right to say no. Power doesn't need to shout. I thought, closing the drawer, but it ends everything, forever. Thank you so much for listening to the story. Don't embarrass yourself with that prop. I hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and reclamation. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to hear which part of the world our community is tuning in from today. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Juliet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one holding all the cards. See you in the next story.